Hey everyone, my name is Poisonblade and I hope all of you are doing well today. So for today's video, I'm going to be building a giant penguin habitat set in a glacier because I thought I could do something very interesting with the underwater viewing area and the glacier setting. And then secondly, I will build a ice farmers village, or at least parts of it, because I wanted to, and I will explain it later on in the video. So with that being said, let's get straight into today's video. So with the glacier setting, it was always going to be here in Valhalla. As soon as I started sculpting the terrain of Valhalla, I was like, this is where a glacier is going to be. But then when I started making today's build, I wanted to have like a little bit of like a story with the glacier, which, I mean, if you've seen any of my builds, it's no surprise that I wanted a story with a build. When I started making this build, I didn't think of like, oh, I want to have a village nearby. So the first story that I made up was like, oh, the glacier actually cracked and split in half. Also, just to say, this is in nowhere going to be like probably a realistic or actually like, well, realistic glacier. I mean, I make a cracked glacier right now, so it's not going to look like an extremely realistic glacier, but it's a fantasy world, so I can do whatever I want with it. But the first idea was just cracked glacier revealing this huge wall of ice through which you can see the penguins swimming around. But then as soon as the ice farmers village came into being, then I thought like, oh, maybe they are farming the glacier. So this was before it became an ice farmers village. Then I thought like, oh, because there are 3 glaciers and they have a little bit more foresight into like, you know, how to retain a source of profit. Because if they farm up the entire glacier, then that source of profit is gone, and then, you know, what are they going to do afterwards? So because they also have 3 glaciers here, this is not, well, it's kind of a huge area in Valhalla, but there are going to be 3 glaciers here. I'm right now building the first one. But as soon as they've reached like a certain point with like farming this glacier, then they leave this glacier for like a couple of years, maybe 1 generation, to let it regrow. And then as soon as they do that, they just move on to the second glacier, start farming that one up, or not up, but starting farming that one until a point that they think like, oh, we need to stop now, otherwise we destroy our source of profit. So then they move on to the third glacier, do the same there, and as soon as they stop farming that one, then they move on to the first one, which by that point has completely regrown. Again, this is in no way probably a realistic way of like glaciers or how maybe even glaciers look, but this was just a general idea and it's a fantasy world, so it doesn't have to be completely realistic. Speaking of this fantasy world, and yes, this is the main point of today's video, I made up a complete fantasy animal for this world, and I want to talk about it because I'm very proud of it and I just really like the animal. And of course, because it's one of the things that I created, it is somewhat deadly, although it's not meant to be. It's not a like monster or like a carnivorous beast. It's actually, well, here's the thing. I didn't make it easy for myself because I also can't really pronounce the name because it's... When I thought of it, it was Nadar. Or Nadar. Or Nardar. Nadar. I think Nardar. I've kind of forgotten the name of the animal. It's been a month or so since I wrote this down because in the meantime I had Triana to worry about. Then I put 2 little dots on the second A, which I think makes it Nador or Nadur. So I'm probably going to continuously switch between Nadur and Nador. But yeah, I didn't make it easy for myself. I made an animal and there is a right way to speak it, but my brain is just like, let's not put that information or keep that information. Just start rambling. A Nadur is basically, think of your regular ass stack, but now make it 4 times larger. Or 3 or 4 times depending on its age. Because, I mean, after a certain point, when you're that large, you don't really have any natural enemies. Or natural predators. So after a certain point, a Nadur is just like, it's there. Bears, wolves and such stay away from it because while it's not like carnivorous, it won't eat meat, so it won't eat you. but it is very territorial. So if it thinks that you are encroaching on its territory, especially if it's like a female one with a baby, and I forgot the name for a baby deer, so I will just say baby Nador the entire time. As soon as it thinks that you're encroaching on its territory, or it in any way, shape or form feels threatened by you, again, a Nador is basically the size of a freaking monster truck, so yeah, I don't think you in any way can threaten it. Although I think it's like seen as like a very prestigious thing if you are able to take down a Nador, but just because of the danger associated with the Nador, nobody really goes for them. Although there are two, like, not species, but two, well, sorts of Nador. You have the ones that live in like the deep parts of the forest, which are huge. And then you have the ones that live on the edge of the forest, which aren't as huge. They're like maybe 2 times, maybe at most 3 times the size of a regular deer. But the ones that live in the deep part of the forest are usually 3 to 5 times, maybe even the size of a regular deer based on its age. And the reason why Nador on the edge of the forest are smaller and actually also don't live as long as the ones in the deeper parts of the forest is because of one thing that I, like, right from the get-go had in mind for these animals, and that is that when a baby Nador is born, the mother starts basically plucking up or ripping out foliage out of the ground and throws it on top of her baby, like on top of the, like, on its back, the back of its head and neck, and on their antlers, because both female and male ones have antlers. Male ones just have bigger antlers. These plants, and let's just say with some parts of this world building that I'm doing, I specifically go very vague. Like with the Caritas Desert, or basically Ken al-Bashar, like nobody knows for certain why the islands float. Of course, me being the creator behind it, I know, but in lore or in worlds, I basically have like the idea of like, oh, have multiple scholars argue it, and then of course this religion thinks it's this god that makes it that, and this religion thinks it's that god or that goddess. So in worlds, nobody really knows why the floating islands exist. But when it came to the Nador, I wanted to be very specific because I wanted to for some reason. I mean, the Nador are like such a, in a way, oddity, or just some, like they are so like out of the ordinary that of course you're going to try and research it, even though a lot of scholars have died in the trying to research it, because again, it's very territorial. The way that the plants stick to its body and continue to grow there is that the coat of a Nador, or Nador, is kind of hook shaped, or at least not the entire coat is hook shaped, but like the individual hairs are kind of like fishing hooks, which, yeah, not all plants stick to it, but the majority of them will. And the first plants usually die because there's no like nutrients, there's only like a sticking point. Like, yes, there's water, but there's no like earth or soil on top of them, unless like the mother rips it out and soil comes along with it. But the first layer usually starts dying down, but because the Nador throughout its life starts or continues to throw foliage and plants on top of its back, it's kind of, the first layer becomes fertilizer for the second layer. As soon as the second layer dies, then the third layer, and by that point there's just like enough plants or dead plants on top of it that, you know, plants just continue to grow. So after a certain point, plants don't really die on top of the Nador anymore. This has also led to that, like, especially very old deep forest Nador have actually been seen with small trees on top of their back. So after a certain point, Nador basically become almost walking islands, which is where the danger lies with Nador, because when a baby Nador is threatened, because a baby Nador is, well, can be taken down by a wolf or a bear, but the first instinct of a Nador then is to just lie as flat on the ground as possible, and because of its thick bones, thick skin, and its strong muscles, it can of course carry the weight of all those plants, but also of any animal that might step on it. So it has been seen for like a wolf or a bear to literally stand on top of a Nador and because the plants also sort of mask the scent of another, these predators are just completely unaware that they are on top of the animal. Like, the antlers are shaped in such a way that they kind of look like, bushes when it's small or a tree when it's larger. That's the first instinct of an adder, and it retains this throughout its lifetime. So when a adult one is sleeping, it also tries to go as flat as possible. Even though it doesn't really have any natural enemies, or natural predators, it just retains this as like a safety position. But because the antlers are kind of shaped like trees by that point, and because some Nadur have actually living small trees on top of their back, because again they throw foliage on top of their back, woodcutters and hunters that go into the deeper parts of the forest well, in the case of woodcutters, they might think that the nadur or the tree or antlers look like a small tree and start trying to cut it down, which then of course wake the nadur up, and it's not going to be happy about it. You trying to take down its antlers or the tree on top of its back, or potential tree on top of its back. Better start running then. Or, especially with the case if like it's a female nadur which might have a baby somewhere, it will basically just start praying to any god or goddess that you might think of, because it's like getting chased by a freaking monster truck. And then also because the antlers are like shaped like branches, so they're kind of spiky, so if an nadur doesn't kill you by head banging into you or kicking you, then there is also the potential of getting basically skewered by a nadur, and then you're basically out of their vision because you're stuck on top of their antlers. But it's also very hard to get down from there, so yeah, you might just the nadur might just start walking, like thinking you are gone, while you're stuck on top of their antlers, skewered and probably bleeding out. But then the carrion birds go for you, so I mean, I think if you encounter an nadur and are going to get killed by it, I think it's just better to just stand there and take the blow instead of being skewered and just hanging there. But yeah, when it comes to hunters, as I said, it is seen as like a very respectable thing or a prestigeful thing to take down a deep forest nadur. Edge of the forest are not really, they're twice the size of a regular deer. There's not that much of like prestige getting with that. But yeah, you're kind of seen as foolish going after a deep forest nadur just because of the danger that they can pose, because they will just go at you. They don't see you as any danger because again they are kind of the size of a monster truck. You are an ant to them. When a hunter does try to take it down, it's usually better to take it down from range, because you don't want to get too close, because then there's those hooves and those antlers that you have to worry about, and it is kind of a slower animal just because of all the weight of like the foliage that it carries, and it's a really big animal, so it does need to take like a bit of a stride to turn around at a certain point, or at least it's just a little bit slower because of it. But yeah, even from range, a nadur is surprisingly fast if it wants to be. If it like really, you're really encroaching on its territory, or it thinks that you're really encroaching on it, or just threatening it in any way, then yeah, can become surprisingly fast. And then it's just, again, start praying to any god or goddess that you might think of, because if it hits you, it's basically game over. It's like getting hit by a wrecking ball or a monster truck. You're not really going to survive that much blunt force to your body. Like, your body will just turn into mush, while your insides probably will turn into mush. But yeah, here's to make it sad, because I mean, I made it kind of morbid already with like the dead body skewered on top of its antlers and it just walks with that hanging. But to make it kind of sad, you can actually easily see if a nadur is sick or elderly, because then it starts eating its own foliage, like it starts eating the plants on top of its back. So if you see a deep forested nadur with like kind of like ravaged foliage on top of its back, it's usually sickly or elderly. The way that I also made it so like, because the Nador don't have any natural predators, this could pose the risk of like them basically flooding the world, because you need predators to keep like the system in balance, so that there's not like a huge amount of animals suddenly of this species because they are not being taken down. But I just immediately also thought like, oh yeah, like the birth rate of these animals or the Nador is quite slow. So that's why they are not taking over the world. They really breed very slowly. But then again, a Nador doesn't have any natural enemies. It can live really long for a tree to start growing on top of its back. Because trees don't really grow that fast. Or at least some trees. Also, I think I should eat because I hope you guys didn't hear it. But I just heard my stomach rumble. So hope the mic didn't pick that up. But here's a little side note, I'm hungry. So my videos are usually less so than the streams, but they're usually kind of a shit show. But I love that about it. Like, I also just love that none of you guys really take the videos that seriously. Like, the community that we've built so far is like, you guys are very positive and very mellow, because whenever I start rambling, you guys seem to just love it. And also whenever I'm really tired and become really goofy, you guys seem to love it. So yeah, I'm really just grateful for everybody watching this video, for the community that we've built up in the past 2 years now. Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it's 2 years. Maybe in like a few months it's 2.5 years, because it's like beginning of December, right? It's like when I started the channel. Although real videos didn't start until like January. So December, I mean, it kind of then makes sense that I'm usually late with like the own anniversary videos, because I think in the 2 years so far, I've never been on time with like an anniversary thing. I also don't think I say anniversary right. But then I also can't speak Nador right. But yeah, so the Nador are basically just gentle giants usually until you get to that. Or until they feel threatened or in any way feel like you're encroaching on their territory. Also, this bridge was built right after I built Tortle's post office, and it was kind of a punishment because Tortle's post office was way too adorable. So I needed to punish myself by building a bridge, because although I don't hate building bridges, I never feel like building bridges. But speaking of adorable things, I am probably going to talk about the Griffkins, another fancy animal that I made up for this world, in the next video, which is going to be the polar bear habitat, so it's going to be huge. But yeah, not every animal in this fantasy world of mine is deadly or dangerous. Griffkins are just kind of adorable, cute little things. So yeah, you might question if I actually thought this up. But then again, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, there's the like or subscribe button. And there's a notification button. But before that one starts to work, yeah, you will take down a Nador, basically. With that being said, I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Bye bye. Now I need to get some food.